Tonight, we're going to be talking about the through line of legacy. I was on a show actually earlier today and was asked to describe legacy and what is it and do I have any frameworks around it and just kind of to lean into legacy in general. And before I talk more about the way that I describe that, I want to just give a little bit of context. This idea of legacy is one that has really been cultivating over the years, and frankly I didn't even realize it. My brother-in-law was 26 years old. He and my sister had a 3-week-old baby girl. She was 20. My sister was 26 too, and they met in their senior year of high school, and he just had the biggest dreams, biggest aspirations, and was probably one of the most gregarious, intentional people I have ever met. And 3 weeks after their baby girl was born, he was killed by a drunk driver. And my mom always talked about the legacy that he left behind. And my sister too. And just the word legacy was always used in relation to my brother-in-law. His name was Nate. And he still is just absolutely a miracle. And so legacy has been in our family for what just turned to be 11 years earlier in October. And with this concept of legacy, my sister is really the one stewarding his legacy in some ways. In another way, when you look at legacy objectively and look at his life and how everyone remembers him, just last year, we all gathered for the 10-year anniversary and celebration of his life. And I cannot tell you how many people's lives were radically changed as the result of knowing him, as a result of rooming with him in college, as a result of his consistent phone calls. There's something about when the person dies, when we suddenly realize the impact they've had in our lives, for better or for worse, right? And frankly, I'm like, man, why is it that we always wait? Why is it that we always wait until the very end? Why is it that we forget even just, and this goes beyond other people. This concept of just living awake and living aware translates even into our own lives. Even I was talking to my dad the other day, and he mentioned, because we're all on this cruise, we're sailing the Mediterranean Sea right now. I'm sailing. We were in Sicily today, which was absolutely breathtaking, and we're on our way to Naples, and we're going to the Amalfi Coast tomorrow. I'm so excited. I've never been there. And anyways, he asked me yesterday or this morning, I can't remember which day. Yesterday. He asked me yesterday, we were in Malta, and he asked, why do you take so many pictures? Do you do anything with them? And I told him, I was like, you know what? I actually don't do much with them. And I want to start being intentional with the photos I take and making little, kind of like a yearbook of my year. And I told him, I live such a beautiful life, and I want to exist in a continuous state of gratitude, because it is so easy to fixate on what is negative, fixate on what is not working, and then miss what is so beautiful right now. And y'all, right now, what is beautiful so often are the very ordinary moments that we end up missing. All my siblings and I've got 5 siblings. There's a whole lot of us. And we look back so fondly on just this simple moments in childhood that you never get back. And I want to create what I know will become magical moments for my kids one day, hopefully. And so many of those, what are the magical moments and what become magical moments, are every day coming home from school and mom had a snack on the table. Or every day, my sister does this with her daughter now, every day after school, she takes her for a walk to talk about what happened during the day. And even if her daughter doesn't necessarily have anything at the moment that they want to talk about, the time and space dedicated to this ritual and routine are ultimately what allow for the topics to come about, because their space is given and afforded to the cultivation of relationship and connection. And so as we look back on our childhoods, as we look back on our lives, the moments that are so beautiful and so memorable often are the ones that are ordinary and didn't even seem that big of a deal in the moment. And so the reason why this leads to legacy is that if we train our mind and train our awareness to be awake here in this moment and thus live with intention, all of that surmounts into what constitutes our legacy. It constitutes our very life. We are living every single moment into and translating it into what becomes a memory and which will eventually be a part of our legacy. We are living our legacy right now. We are building our legacy today. And the question then becomes, well, what am I building towards? What do I want it to be at the end of my life? And so, with this question of legacy, when we're thinking about other people, so much of what constitutes a legacy is, well, how did that person make me feel? What are the actual emotions I have surrounding that person? What actually do they have tangibly to hand over to someone? What do they have to stand for in terms of their mantra, their own life lessons, like who they are? So it's how I feel, anything tangible that they had to hand over, and then the essence of their being. So kind of reordering those. So the essence of the being, let's put that as number one. That is kind of like the first core, first like kind of the internal part of legacy. It's who were they, the essence of their being. The second, connection. Who were they in relationship? Who did they impact? How did those people change and transform as a result? And then third, what did they build? And so those three elements really serve as kind of the triad of legacy. And so when we're talking about building legacy, and the reason why this has kind of morphed and evolved over the years is that I have in the knowing agency for the last 6 years that I've been building it, realizing, okay, and it was a transformational process. For the first couple of years, I was really focusing on, okay, let's actually do the output. So in terms of what you're building, that's kind of the third point. We'll focus on that first. The third part of what constitutes a building or having a legacy is what you build. That aspect is so much focused on the external. It's so much focused on the output of whatever that thing is that the person is most proud of, like the accolades, the praise, the awards won. All of that are usually it's the shiny gold tropes and trophies, right? And so in that regard, I focused so much on that at first when I was building my business, because that's what everyone cares about in order to kind of build the trust in you as a business. Like, how are you going to come in and give me tangible KPIs that I can look at to see the impact of what you're doing? And then over the years, I realized how much emotional connection was so necessary. So businesses, when they're actually working towards an end goal, so much of their success is predicated not just on their products, but on the people. Like, the people are really the heartbeat, and the people and the relationships, the strength thereof often turn and translate into the strength of the product and the strength of the output. Yet, when you back up, so kind of looking at it from that kind of layered approach, so many people spend their time focusing on what we're building. But then when you back up, the people are and relationships are behind it. And then when you back up even further, it's what's the essence of the brand? What's the essence of the person? What's the essence and ethos of the company that then allows it to translate into the relationships with the people, that then translates into the output of the product? And it's not just relationship with the people in the leadership team, but it's also the relationship of and with the customers. So it's really this layered approach to both legacy and also to the way that we engage with in life in general. But it starts at the nucleus, it starts at the internal, it starts at the core. It must and it has to be strong in order to then allow for the external relationships that then impact the external build and something tangible to hopefully hand over. And so diving into this, there's something about the intentional investigation of our own self. I mentioned this on the initial interview. Writing a legacy or writing a eulogy, I'm sorry, was so incredibly important for me. It was so helpful to get so clear on who do I want to be in terms of my own essence, my own ethos, what are my values, how do I want to be remembered in terms of my very being, and then how do I actually want to make people feel, what's the impact I want to make on them and in their lives at the end of mine, and then what do I want to have built outside of me. What do I want to leave behind in something, in terms of something tangible and something that truly represents me? And for some folks, in one sense, it's like, oh, well, I don't own a business. Um, I don't necessarily, even today, the Mike Abramowitz, I was on his show, Better Than Rich, love the name. And he asked, well, for the person who frankly is just wanting to provide for his family, what do you say to them? They don't necessarily have any big goals for building a big legacy. And there was something about first that's so I completely resonate with that, because in one sense, um, I think a lot of folks that I engage with at first blush, they're coming at life in that lens, right? They're viewing the world through that lens, 9 to 5, and not really wanting to build something tangible to hand over to the next generation per se. And so just sitting with that, I think it's so important that we realize that every bit of life that we engage in terms of the external world, every output, we're building, we're creators. And we are creators because we are made in the likeness of the creator himself. So whether we like it or not, we are builders, we're creators, we're always making something. And then the question is, well, am I making something in alignment with what I feel called to and I am called to? Or am I mirroring and mimicking those around me? Am I just a big old pantomime? Or am I actually truly operating from this authentic place, from almost like, and y'all, I think of it as kind of this secret place, this place that I have access to that no one else ever does. And in this space, in this sacred space, from that area, I get to align my soul, my spirit, and my true myself, and convene with the divine in that space. And in that place, man, there is revelation, there is inspiration, there is new original creation. I think about this and I'm like, how many of us are actually creating anything of origin versus how many of us are just repeating what we've heard? It is so critical, this space is so critical. And I really want to think about, like, what is that called? Because at first I called it the wilderness. When my husband first left, I really retreated into isolation and just really began the excavation of knowing who I am, because I had grown up, so I call it horizontal alignment. I was looking to the right and to the left. And effectively my compass was navigated east and west rather than pointing north. I was so beholden and reliant upon what everyone else said around me, what to think, how to act, what to wear, everything from the thoughts and the behaviors and the beliefs to the physical manner in which I showed up, that, like, literally the clothes I was wearing. And so it took such radical action to have almost a reclamation, to reclaim. And that reclamation could only happen after I even remembered who I was. There's a remembering, there's a homecoming. And I love the example that Michelangelo gave when he was asked, how did you create David? He said, well, I chipped away at who he's not. And so in us being able to remember and thus reclaim who we were created to be in the first place, there's a chipping away of who we're not to return to who we are. And from that place, from that baseline of authentic, let's say an authentic structure of you and me, then we can create something new. But we have to return to almost this place of stasis, of getting to a baseline of, okay, this is who I am. Now let's build and add to it. And so if we're creating from, and I've seen folks create from a non-baseline, let's say, but then it's going to be the creation muddled with what still needs to be removed. And it's harder to do that, but it can be done. And so in us, the thought of removing and shedding off what is old, Jordan Peterson talks about dead wood. There's parts of us that are just dead wood. It no longer serves us. And that's something that's interesting too, as we're thinking about this first part, this core fixture of legacy, of, well, what's the essence of my being? What are my ethos in terms of the core beliefs that are going to hold as the structure for my life and the architect of it? There's a lot there. There's a lot there that served us at one point, and it can be thanked and honored, and then it can be done away with, you know, because it no longer serves us. But we have to do the work to know what is the current structure and fixture in our being, in our mind, in our soul, in our spirit, in order to then chip away at what needs to go and what no longer serves us, and then create the new structure. Because when we have the ideal, this is why writing the eulogy is so important. When we know what the ideal is, we can identify, okay, this is where I am now. This is my baseline. Okay, this is what I need to create. This is what I need to add in order to be able to achieve the ideal and get to that new destination. But apart from the removal, so many times we end up doing a 360 rather than a lateral 180. And so in the removal process, in the shedding, in, like Michelangelo said, chipping away at who we are not and returning to the purity of the essence of our original state, then we can create. And in our creation, it's almost like building the bridge to the 180 lateral change and building the bridge to the ideal effectively. So that's state number one. Is the first part of building a legacy, is really being able to have our true self, living in alignment, knowing our ideal, and existing with the ability to know how the past shows up in the present, and then build the bridge and the connective tissue to our potential ideal. And so that's number one. Number two is really the relational component in terms of how are we actually truly showing up. So once we've got the vertical down, now we can get to the horizontal. And in the horizontal, it's like, okay, well, how does that translate? How does the vertical actually translate and show up in relationships? And at the end of my life, what would people say about me? And here's what's so interesting is that every single person is going to say something different, because our relationship with every person is very different. Right? And so what does that look like? What does it look like to actually do an analysis and an audit of our top 5 to 10 relationships and consider, all right, well, how do I currently make people feel? And what is my ideal for that relationship? What is my ideal for that role? I did this exercise with a group in Colombia back in February, I think, of this year. I was working with a team, and I had everybody write down like basically doing an audit and analyzation of their role, and then also what's the ideal of that. And that was in a business context. And so for me, I actually took that a step further, and I did an analysis of what is my role as a sister. And I started a little bit more high level in terms of just sister in general, because I realized in that moment, I have only ever abided by the definition of what other people have said of what a sister looks like. And I've never thought, what do I want my role as sister to be? What is health actually look like for me, given my personality, given my temperament, given my experience? And now, what do I want my sister to look like? This is the next level. What does my role as sister look like with my youngest sister, and then with my oldest sister, and then with my middle sister, and then my 2 brothers? Every single relationship is so different. And so for those core relationships in our lives, it is so incredibly important that we examine, who do I want to be in that relationship? How do I want to make them feel? And what do the boundary lines look like in that capacity? What would the ideal relationship look like? And then it's, let me go and take that ideal to them. Because when someone else can buy into the vision and even the ideals around whatever it is, right? It could be an ideal surrounding my own self. It could be the ideal surrounding that relationship. It could be an ideal, in terms of physical body. It could be the intellect. that's where, when we're talking about the ideal, it's so well rounded, right? I've got the ideal for, okay, who do I want to be intellectually, who do I want to be emotionally, who do I want to be spiritually, who do I want to be physically, and being able to take that into the relationship, and then have that guide us. And even as I say this, my sisters and I, we've had a number of late night conversations over the last couple of days, and our alignment in terms of how we examine and consider our relationship is so on par that every single time we're together, we're either laughing or having a very deep, meaningful conversation. And each time we're changing a little bit more for the better in alignment towards our ideal, where each one of those conversations is actually a bit of an addition to the creative bridge that is the connective tissue from where we are today to the ideal. And so it is so important, though, that we, before we go into those relationships, and before we actually go into that environment, we do the work to assume radical responsibility of what do I even want it to look like in the first place? Because God only knows I'm just going to be morphing and acting on autopilot to step into a role with someone else that was either handed to me or one that I assumed and learned in childhood, where frankly, it wasn't by my own design. It was because that's how mom and dad dictated that it should be. And y'all, we do this not just with our family, but we do this in our jobs as well, whether we're the owner, founder, or the operator, or any other title. And so this is where it's, if we're acting on autopilot, we're going to live asleep in every single role in our life. But once we start living awake, once we start designing and creating our life with intention, we then are able to create the experience within that dynamic as well. So when I say experience, when we say, okay, how do we want to make them feel? What's our ideal for that relationship? And then what's the experience? What's the action? What's the outcome of that dynamic actually manifested? So when we're talking about, okay, pillar number 1 of legacy is our own internal essence. Pillar number 2 is the how we make others feel in relationship. And then pillar number 3 is what we're building. Well, what we're building in as a result of that relationship, that's a different, going back to number 2, what we build is the outcome of how we make them feel in our ideal. We're building something, and often it's an experience in that relational component. And so when we're looking at the end of our lives, it's money in the bank. And also there's this book written called Die with Zero, and it's all about the experiences that are put in the bank at the end of our life. And so you can choose to have money in the bank, and you can also choose to have a bank chock full of experiences, living a rich life. I was standing there today in this piazza in Sicily, watching this clock next to this beautiful church, and there was these golden, like, people and figurines, let's say that figurines, because it was both people and also animals. And I've never seen this. My sister knows the right word. I can't recall. But at the top of the hour, the lion, literally this golden figurine, puts his head back, and then the sound, and you like see his little mouth open, and then this beautiful roar explodes from his mouth. And then he roars 3 times, very slowly, very methodically. And this is so high up. And then the next level down is this golden rooster. And they're literally these big golden figurines. And then slowly the rooster opens its wings and starts flapping slowly and methodically. And then this beautiful sound emanates, this beautiful crowing. And then Ave Maria starts playing from the steeple. It was the most magical moment. I literally stood in the shade and just closed my eyes and and I had this thought. I thought, I am right now investing in my experience bank. I will never forget this moment. And so, yes, we've got money in the bank as something that we build. We've got tangible businesses as something that we build. And then we have experiences. And that experience, in terms of, the outcome of the ideal in relationship with others, experience is also the outcome of our ideal with ourselves. I've created so many beautiful experiences just for me. And I'm so incredibly grateful to be creating these experiences with my family. I'm just over the moon to be traveling with others. I've traveled a lot by myself over the last 3 years, and it is so meaningful to travel with others. But when we're thinking about what we're building, it's not just some tangible asset outside of ourselves. It is also something tangibly inside that we get to share with other people that is so, man, that is wealth. Those experiences are wealth. And so that's the second category. The third category, in terms of what we're building, we've just talked about this a little bit. These experiences, the money in the bank, a tangible physical asset of a business. Y'all, it is so important. So long as our business is in our head, in terms of the data, in terms of the systems, processes, it is not something ever that we can pass down. And so almost a good metric by way of assessing the ability of, at the end of my life, have I truly built an asset is it able to be sold, scaled, or is succession possible? And if none of those three are possible, it's like, well, I don't think you've built something really truly as an asset to hand over, because there's no real handover. It's right. So it's taking all it outward and putting it into something tangible to then be able to hand over. With that, when we talk about legacy, then just the eulogy that's written, obviously so, right? Yet we need to really think about this question, because we are living our legacy right now, moment by moment. And it is so incredibly important that we ask these questions of, who do I want to be at the end of my life? What are the relationships that I want to have at the end of my life? What do I want them to look like, feel like? What's the impact I want to make in those? How do I want them? And I say feel. That's really important. When I sat and thought, how would my youngest sister feel towards me? Yes, of course, there'd be sorrow and grieving over loss. But how have I made her feel? How have I actually impacted her life? And y'all, in asking that question, what's my ideal for these specific relationships? I've identified some really great opportunities and areas that I need to grow in, because actually I want my sister to feel like, and I'll just be really candid with you guys. I am someone that has held empathy to the extent that it's like I've dipped over into the dark side of empathy. And the dark side of empathy is effectively, yes, it can look like codependence, but it can also look like this really desperate need for everybody to be okay, for everybody to like you. And it can be so unhealthy. And the light side of it is that, man, people can feel so seen and so loved, right? So with every light, there's a shadow. And with every shadow, there's a light. So as we're, just a quick sidebar, but for every single one of us that is looking for an area to grow in, if we're so fixated on the shadow and so fixated on what's wrong, consider maybe what's the light there? What's the beauty in that? What's the flip side, the other side of the coin? Because for every area that we need to grow, there's something beautiful. And so I know that this area is actually something that I really do want to grow in. And a dark side of empathy is control, right? I really, really can try to control relationships because I don't want anyone to ever feel any pain. That's not the human experience. And actually, in pain, sometimes that can be the catalyst to the greatest growth. And so if I'm constantly trying to protect those I love from ever feeling an ounce of pain, well, I could actually be fundamentally preventing them from getting to the next level in their own journey. So let's get out of the freaking way and come alongside rather than leading or coaxing or coercing. So in me sharing that, I've seen how my desire to protect, my desire to even be kind of a mother hen can actually really get in the way of relationship and depth with my two younger sisters. And so I have had to make some intentional change on how I show up with them so that I can truly just enjoy them, be a peer, be a friend, not self-abandon in any way. And just literally, I love this concept of just enjoying them. I was actually in the hot tub with them the other night, and we were all drinking wine, and they live together right now. And it's just so beautiful watching their relationship. It's so, so, so wonderful. And it was fun to just have this thought of like, "Ah, I just get to enjoy them. Like, I don't need to enter into it. I don't need to like fit in, right? And I get to just enjoy them. And the beauty of that is that there's so much freedom in it rather than any of those any of those narratives, man, that really, really can get in the way and prevent connection. Like a narrative for me personally, since ever since I was a little kid, I'm awkwardly in the middle, and so I always kind of felt a little bit alone, a lot of it alone. And so over the years, I've really had to combat that narrative of me being lonely and me feeling like it's me and God against the world, and no one understands, and those very isolating thoughts, and rather recognize, man, we're so lucky to have each other. I'm so grateful to be in relationship with them. We're actually all so connected, and I just get to enjoy what they have that's so special and so beautiful. And so in that element of identifying what my eulogy is for every single person, I don't want them, my two younger sisters specifically, I don't want them to feel um like they have to not walk on eggshells, but what was it? I don't want them to feel like I'm easily offendable. And so how then do I need to grow so that they can kind of do their thing, and whatever happens, and I'm good. I'm not codependent. And so that's my growth opportunity. And I've been working on that for a good number of years now because I really, really was oriented in a codependent mindset throughout the majority of my marriage. And that really impacted the way that I fundamentally established myself as an adult at 20 years old. I got married when I was 20. So I had to unlearn, and I still am having to unlearn some very deep programming in my neurological pathways. So in that process of identifying our eulogy, identifying who we want to be in relationship with others, identifying how we want them to feel with us, we'll also see those opportunities for growth. And we also get to celebrate the light and the real beauty that we do bring to the relationships simultaneously. And then third, what am I building? What do I want to build? What is at the end of the day, when I'm reading my eulogy, when I read the impact that I have in the world, and the literal assets and the experiences that I'm building, what does that look like? And really getting specific about what it looks like. When we actually chart out how many lives have I changed? What's the size of the business? What's the monetary value of it? And beyond. So with that, thank you for joining me tonight. I had fun and so thank you so much for joining me tonight. I had fun talking legacy with you. I am hosting 3 workshops, October 30th, November 20th, December 18th. And all 3 are at 12 o'clock Eastern. And I would love to have you join me. I'll go ahead and drop the dates here in the comments, and just shoot me a note if you would like a link. And with that,